I'm going to start with a few general comments. I'm very curious to know who you are and how we can use our time best. Are you mostly students, journalists?
I'm not going to be able to get
You have to stay here.
Nonfiction writers.
Why don't you take a chair over there?
Nonfiction writers.
Art writer, journalist.
Well, who's the art writer? What's your name?
Kathleen McQueen.
Okay. Hi.
Hi.
Oh, Kathleen McQueen? That's you? McQueen. Yeah, from Newsweek?
No, Bob Bailey.
Sorry, I'll stop playing. Do you know? Okay, thank you for coming. Anyway, I am journalist. Kind of, some. Yeah, right. We all wear many hats these days, right? We all have many gigs. So I was in Prague last week, and I went to the Museum of Communism, and they have something there called an interrogation room. They recreate a Soviet-era interrogation room, and I wonder what's going to be in it. And I was very curious, and I looked, and it was just a desk and a chair. You know, no waterboarding instruments or weapons. And I thought, well, whoever was sitting behind that desk must have really known how to ask very good questions. Because, you know, I don't think you really need instruments of torture in order to extract information, whether you're a Soviet official trying to get information out of spies and prisoners, or whether you're a journalist. I mean, I think you really have to. It just takes enormous awareness of the situation. And I did the Q&A column at the New York Times for about a decade on a weekly basis, and that's how I earned my stripes as an interviewer. And I always find the most important thing in doing an interview is to read a lot before you do the interview. You cannot go into any interview uninformed, or you'll just let the person weave circles around you.
Exactly.
And you're nodding your head. Okay, and you know, and sometimes it's annoying because if you're doing a quick interview, you may not want to spend a lot of time preparing and learning this person's whole life history and reading, but you have to do that. And now, I mean, one of the great things about Google, as unreliable as it can be, is that it also allows us to become instant experts. You could Google around on anybody and learn about a person's background very quickly. Right?
Are you asking me
I'm
my
asking
opinion
you.
of Google? Well, you know, I'm actually somebody who gets Googled a lot, and so I have a sort of innate. I get Googled because
Yeah.
I'm a little bit more of I'm a playwright, so people are always, I don't know, they're looking me up.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of stuff out there about me
Misinformation.
that's just not true, and
That's
so
true.
I get afraid. You just made me afraid in my heart. Although I actually think that you're right. Like,
Right, but you also, I mean, we all read critically. You have to read a lot so that you know kind of what sounds familiar, what sounds like the repeated bullshit, because some stories get repeated again and again. I find, though, if I'm reading about a subject, usually if you read, let's say, for at least an hour or two, as opposed to 3 minutes, 3 minutes is not enough to prepare for an interview. If you read for an hour or two, usually something starts to really interest you. And other parts will start to bore you when you're reading about a person's life. And the part that's interesting, you know, then kind of develops into the theme of your interview. You realize what is interesting to you about that person. And you don't have to cover every detail of a person's life. Of course, I don't know what kind of interview we're talking about exactly now. I mean, sometimes you do need to cover every detail. If you're writing a New Yorker profile, you need to collect massive amounts of information, which then you will discard in writing a piece. I mean, it's sometimes said that a good journalist uses about 10% of his or her information and throws away the rest. And a real desperado uses 100% of his or her information. You know, if you don't have much, it all goes into the story. But if you did your job, there's a lot of information that's going to be left over in the end, because you're going to pick what interests you. And you know, so I think all interviews have their own kind of narrative momentum and their own theme. And it's helpful to know, I know this goes against what they teach you in journalism school, where they say, oh, don't ever make up your mind about anything. You're just a neutral receptacle for information. But when I go in, I always know kind of what interests me about a person. And my own approach, which may not be yours at all, is always biographical. Meaning, if you're interviewing someone, you're interviewing them because they did something of interest, right? Presumably. And it's interesting to me as a biographer, because that's what I also do, is write biographies of artists, to find the correlation between the work and the life. And if you can figure out that link between the work and the life, why are you a playwright? Why are you a playwright? And I could ask you 10 questions, I bet.
Can I ask you a question?
And I could figure out in a very simplistic way, admittedly, but something about why did you become a playwright. So a question in 1 minute. I was going to say it's always very important to me to ask people about their childhoods. I always want to know, where are you from? How old are you? What did your parents do? Because I think, you can really give a much fuller sense of somebody. I don't want to hear someone just talking about, we opened our restaurant and the red peppers are selling really well, and, you could give that interview so much depth by saying, where did you grow up? What did your parents do? How did you get interested in peppers? Find the link between the life and the work. Always. And that makes everything more meaningful for me.
So you, what I'm hearing you say that I think is very exciting is that the interviewer, when you're doing an interview, your personality and your interests are at stake and engaged. That the object isn't some sort of journalistic.
No.
Okay.
No, you know what interests you about a person. So if you have a limited amount of time, again, there are different kinds of interviews. There's the New Yorker interview where you're meeting with somebody 10 times over many hours. That's obviously different than doing, let's say, a 15-minute phone interview. But if you're doing a short interview, I think no matter what you're interviewing the person about, always ask them about their childhood. And it's fun to include, even if it seems marginal at the time or unrelated. It's a way of deepening the interview, right? Because sometimes I always like a little bit of extra information. I hate when I'm reading interviews and they don't even give a person's age. I even put people's ages in my tweets. Like when I tweeted about Mel Bachner, who's an artist who has a show at the Jewish Museum this week, I put in that he was 73. Because that adds a lot. A 73-year-old, he doesn't look that old. All artists look young. They're all eternal hipsters. You can't tell how old they are. I would have thought he was 40 or something, looking at his picture. And if you put 73 on, just think of the pathos that you are adding to the subject. You think, okay, this guy's been through a lot, and his time is limited. And I like knowing that he's 73 instead of 40. So I don't see that as I don't believe that that's just pointless personal detail. I think someone's age tells you immediately. Just think, 2 little characters, unless they're under the age of 10, then it's just 1 character. 2 little characters tell you when that person was born and what era they grew up in, whether they're a 60s person or a 70s person or an 80s person. So no matter what subject you're interviewing them about, you always want to know how old they are and where they grew up. I'm amazed. I read so many profiles and there's just like nothing about where this person is from. And I think where you're from does shape what you're doing now. Some of you may disagree. And I love knowing what people's parents did, but maybe that's just too much nosiness. Also, if you're interviewing subject, because I think that says a lot about why people are doing what they're doing. I guess I believe that, our really deepest ties and influences are our family. And a lot of people would disagree with that. I think, your what you grew up with is always with you, whether you accept it or reject it. It helps define who you are. And if you could find out a little bit about somebody's family, it's just a way of providing, in shorthand, some information about why they became who they are. You look baffled.
Oh, no, what I'm thinking is I'm a clinical psychologist.
Yeah.
And I can do an intake interview with someone, and in 1 hour I can know a great deal about them. But to what extent is doing that intake interview with someone you're interviewing for some kind of literary purpose going to be off-putting to them and close shut things
Well,
down?
there is a lot of overlap between the psychologist and the journalist, and I often feel like a failed shrink. Because for those very reasons. I think people love talking about themselves, and that as an interviewer, the first thing you really have to take very seriously is that you're doing them a favor. Don't feel like, oh God, I'm taking up their time. Oh my God, I feel so guilty, they have other things to do. There are some, people like that I know journalists, like, they can't do interviews. They're like, they don't want to stop anybody, whether it's someone on the street or they just can't do it. They feel like, they're just interfering with someone else's day. And if that's how you feel, then you should be an editor and not a questioner. Because a questioner, you have to believe that the person, that it's a constructive process. You're not just invading their privacy. You are offering something. You certainly are offering something as a psychologist. I don't know what I'm offering people. I mean, it varies. It could be publicity. It could be a process of self-clarification. But I think people do like talking about themselves. They love talking about their childhoods, especially. And, so if I'm going to go interview somebody, let's say you're interviewing somebody evil. Okay, or just some politician you hate, or somebody who committed a crime. Okay, you go and ask them, and I'm working on something now. I actually got someone who committed a crime, and you just ask a lot about their for days. You could talk about their childhood, the rest of their lives. People love talking about that. Their parents, their grandparents. And it could be a way, if we're going to talk about this in cynical terms, it could also be a way to warm someone up and get them to trust you. And anyone can talk about their childhood. It's really easy. Like, nobody thinks, I don't know what the answer to that is. And I think I think people like those sort of questions, and the kind of questions they really hate are like, what's your favorite record album? It's just, where they're expected to define themselves according to some clever answer. And those never tell you anything anyway. Yes?
Have you ever come across somebody that you've interviewed who is firm about not wanting to talk about his or her child or family? But,
Talk about their family.
Really feels like that's private. I don't want to talk. What do you then want? Have you ever come across that?
Well, if they're that resistant, then they probably don't want to be interviewed at all. Isn't that true?
I don't know.
I mean, so those are special
Have
cases.
you encountered that?
That's when you bring out the waterboarding. No, that's when No, I have never. If you ask somebody, where are you from? Will they say, what does that have to do with it? No, I think people.
No, I don't mean where are you from, but I mean, when you're saying the biography, the family, what the parents do, all that, kind of trying to understand who the person is based on.
A few questions. You agree, right? In an hour, you could get an incredible sense of somebody. No, I find people like talking about that, and sometimes I ask questions. I'll say, were you closer to your mother or your father? I'm amazed that people will answer that. Some people don't think in those terms. It doesn't even occur to them that you could be closer to one parent than the other, so they'll say, I don't know. But that tells you something too. I mean, you could see how psychological somebody is, and I think, even if you're interviewing a school board member, it's still good to ask people a little bit about themselves.
Have you ever come across somebody who basically hated their childhood growing up and they don't want to talk about it because it's painful to them, or they just they had a crappy childhood?
Well, people love talking about crappy childhoods. I mean, that is everyone's favorite subject. And then my mother did this, and then my mother did that. I think it's, and I always get to know when everyone blames everything on mothers, especially when I read biographies. Everyone blames everything on mothers, and I think they should blame their fathers more for their crappy childhoods. But when you
situation than a job interview where you're not allowed to ask certain kind of questions when you're a journalist.
Wait, you said a job interview.
Yeah, where you're not allowed to ask certain kinds of personal.
Is that what you do?
Just recently interviewed an editorial fellow, and we're interviewing young people who are in.
You work in human resources?
In publishing, actually.
In publishing, there aren't quite. Okay. Well, that's. Wow. That's an interesting challenge. There are questions you can't ask.
Mm-hmm.
Like which
How old
parent
are
were you
you?
closer
How old are
to?
you? How old are you? You can't ask.
No.
Yeah.
You just have to guess by when they graduated from college.
Oh, wow. That
Do
is.
they have to tell you when they graduated from college?
They'll give you a resume. It usually says on it. But,
That's an interest. So what's one question that you could ask that you find to be very revealing? Is there some, do you say, like, what do you like to do in your free time? Can you ask that? Or
what have you liked about previous jobs that you've done? What did you find most interesting when you were in school? Subjects.
Wow. You're probably listening more to their style of talking as opposed to trying to obtain information. And that kind of, you want to make sure that they're not furious, that they didn't hate every aspect of, every class
Right.
at every college. And, so you're looking for a conversational style. And that's a little different than trying to extract information, since you're not allowed to extract information. Yeah. Huh. So,
I think we always would welcome if somebody volunteers those kind of things, but you have to get at it very indirectly, because I think you want to know some of the same things that you're saying you want to know when you're interviewing.
I can't believe you're not allowed to ask, but all that I'm sure is very regimented. Yeah. So, yes.
I wanted to just build on that and actually ask about the difference between information and your inference of their style. So I feel everybody has a front story. So whether you're doing a job interview, a date, a biography, everyone has a front story that they want you to take.
Did you call it front story?
A front story, yeah.
Okay, right.
How do you distinguish between the front story of what they're saying and your sense of their choice of the information they're giving you versus the context and playing into that gap between the two?
Well, I think it's a great question. I think if you've read a lot beforehand, then you're prepared. One thing I can't stand is this is a category of person who just mentions Harvard every other word. They went to Harvard, their children went to Harvard, their parents went to Harvard, all their friends went, and I'll call them on that. I will call people on that. I'm rude. I can be very rude.
What do you do? What does that mean? You call them on?
I'll say, why do you keep mentioning Harvard? Are you, I'm not trying to get a donation to Harvard University from you. Somebody got very mad at me once, the head of the World Bank, when I said, I can't. It's just, no, because it becomes very pompous and annoying when somebody just keeps advertising, and it's boring. But anyway, so that's like one kind of story. There's people with those kind of perfect Ivy League credentials who only want to talk about that. But, so there's that kind of a boring interview, okay? That's their story. So how do you get beyond that? What if you have to interview someone? That's a problem if you're a journalist, and they're just not interesting, and you think, how am I going to do this story? Then you have to have certain questions.
I have a question. You just said that you're sometimes very rude, which I think in some ways I would say, should be part of being. Maybe not rude, but to push to, sort of figure out there's something else going on here. Do you think that is a huge part of, being a good interviewer is to have that side of you that is a little bit confrontational?
Everyone has their own style. Was it Woodward or Bernstein? Which one? Probably Woodward. Said that he thinks the best thing to do is be quiet and let people talk, and I thought, you've got to be kidding. No one would ever tell me anything. Whereas I think it's just, I always feel when I'm interviewing people, I actually like them when I'm talking to them, and I want to hear about them. I feel I feel genuine interest in them. And so that's my personality, and if they say something that's ridiculous, I will. You could tease people affectionately about that, and it depends on your personal style, and how comfortable you are being in contact with someone else. Every shrink has his or her own style. Isn't that true? Every therapist, So, I like, and also I recently published a book and was interviewed, and I was just fascinated by being interviewed and observing everyone's style. And I liked people. I noticed that it really meant a lot to me when someone came in and complimented me. I thought it's important to start with a compliment. That might sound like obvious, but a lot of people just walk in and, you don't know if they've read your book, and they just says, oh, how's it selling? And you just want to hold your head. And I feel like if you're interviewing a writer, for instance, you should always say either I like your book or I'm looking forward to reading it. Or it's on my nightstand. That's okay to say if you haven't read it yet. And I ditto for playwrights and everyone else. I'm looking forward to seeing your play. Not how's it selling? It's amazing. There was a party in my building recently, and in New York, for about 100 people. We have it once a year, and everyone in my building said to me, "How is your book selling?" And I'm like, "Has anyone in this building read it?" That's not the question to ask. So you should try to be empathic. Realize that anybody you're interviewing feels vulnerable. They're in the weaker position. You're in the position of strength. Be nice. Be your empathic best. And you will get a lot out of them. And I was amazed that people I interviewed, were so, when they were nice, I was really touched. If I felt like they had read my work, that was incredible to me, if they really kind of paid attention to what I was doing. So that just also goes along the lines of be prepared when you interview somebody. If they see that you took the time, obviously, to see what they're up to, I think it will put them at ease, and they're likely to be more open. Oh, yes.
I'm curious about when you are interviewing somebody, maybe about something sensitive or that they feel sensitive about, and you get the shutdown. And when you try to ask the question in different ways, so I'm just curious about what your advice is when it's a critical piece of...
Right. Well, if it's a really hostile thing, wait, was it Joe Scarborough? Is that his name on Morning Joe?
Yes.
Joe Scarborough?
Yeah.
What's his last name? Morning Joe on TV?
Joe Scarborough. That's it.
Right. Well, once an intern died in his office when he was a congressman in Florida, and I asked that way too early in the interview. I said, how did she die? Aren't some people accusing you of having killed her? I thought it was funny. It was so furious. The interview never recovered. So if you have questions like that, you should have saved them for the end, obviously. And you should always say, if you think that somebody murdered their intern, you shouldn't say, did you kill her? You should say, oh, I read somewhere some people who know nothing say you killed her. What do you think of that? Be this is I tend to be an ally when I interview people, and it is genuine when I'm sitting in the room. I feel for them because they're being interviewed, they're being exposed, and so I feel like momentarily an ally, and you don't. So I say save tough questions for the end. Let them enjoy the process. They shouldn't squeal. Mike, I hate the way Mike Wallace does it, hitting everyone over the head with the microphone. That's another style of journalism. You're corrupt. You stole money. What do you say? Yes.
I mean, it's a quick one, but you said just now, you're as the interviewer, you're in a position of power, and the other one is kind of coming up and could feel vulnerable.
Right.
I've only conducted a formal interview once, and it was for an academic position. So I was 28 at the time, and this artist, she's amazing, completely intimidated by her. Do you think there's ever... Can anyone conduct an interview with anyone else? Could you get, some 25-year-old intern from Penn to do an interview with Salman Rushdie, or is that an inappropriate pairing? Or, I just wonder what you thought about that.
No, anyone could do an interview. But I think you should be nice. Even when you're asking tough questions, you should be nice. And you could say, I know this is a terrible question. Or you may, sorry to ask you this. You could say that. Sorry, I have to ask this question. And usually I find that what you think they're not going to like, they don't care about. It's very hard to predict what questions will upset people, so you should ask everything. You're entitled to ask everything when you go into an interview. You do risk pissing the person off if you asked a lot of hostile questions. So if you're going in with hostile questions, definitely save those for the end. Yes?
Going back to the question of what you do once an interview goes bad.
Yeah.
I recently had a similar experience to yours, I think, and I just realized sitting there that I didn't have a plan B.
Oh.
I was wondering, like, what do you, like, sort of, what do you do?
Yeah, the person starts withdrawing.
Yeah.
Then you have to ask them about their childhood and their parents. And their grandparents. Your grandparents. Tell me about your childhood. I'm so curious about your childhood. Tell me about where'd you grow up? And be a good listener. Be a good listener. Yes.
One time I was doing a film interview on a documentary, and I asked around the audience to kind of see what their what their reaction was to the documentary, and this was a good friend of the director.
Yeah.
I went to her and she says, and she goes, "What makes you qualified to interview?"
Yeah. Okay, well that's a difficult subject. That's a difficult subject.
But she was like a good friend. I thought I could get like an inside perspective. I was just asking.
Wait, so you had to interview her, or she was the friend of the? You interviewed her as well, the friend of the director?
I didn't have to. I was just trying to get an overview of what other people.
Right. The background.
Opinion was, and just any audience member. It happened to be a good friend of the director, and then she goes, "What makes you qualified to do this interview?" I was just kind of shocked. I was just like, I'm writing from the perspective of the film.
Yeah.
I appreciate the film.
Right.
But I was just kind of.
Yeah. Well, someone like that, I would say, is terrified of you. And if you really want her participation, the best thing to do is just to be really nice and put her at ease. Again, that's my approach. I would say, well, I'm making a documentary about your friend, and I would love it if you feel like participating. I value what you have to say, that sort of stuff. But she probably wouldn't be helpful anyway. She sounds like just an angry person. Did you have a camera on? Because if you were,
I was
background
doing a movie review of the documentary,
okay.
And I was going to slowly interview the director, and so I was just trying to get other people's point of view. And it happened to be a friend of hers. I thought as a friend she would be like, "Oh, it's great. Oh, I could, what do you want to know?" But she was just like, "What makes you qualified to interview?"
Yeah, well, don't take that personally, certainly. She's an angry woman. And and a lot of your behavior is going to depend on whether you need her or not. I mean, sometimes you need furious people because of the story you're working on, and that's tiresome to have to cultivate furious people. I'm laughing. I feel like I spent half my life cultivating furious people. Yes.
Maybe you have some advice for the situation. I also interview a lot of creative people.
Well, in what capacity? Can you tell us?
Like I interview a lot of TV directors, for instance.
Yeah.
And I try to look at episodes they've directed so that I can be very specific with questions. But at a certain point, I always want to find out, what stood out for you in this situation. What scene was particularly challenging. As soon as I say something like that, I find 90% of the time it draws a blank. What stood out for you? All of a sudden they get nervous or something and they can't think of what stood out for them.
Right.
Do you have any advice for a better way to put it, or?
But if you really want that information, do you really want the information of what stood out for them?
Yeah, I do. There might be, something I didn't see when I was looking at the episode that really stood out for them that would be interesting to write about. But how will I know? Unless they are comfortable enough to be able to recollect that sort of thing. But I just find when you put them on the spot that way, it usually doesn't.
Right, it is putting them on the spot.
Yeah.
And I think a better way in would be to talk about something that you liked. Because I like this scene. Because you've seen these already, right? You've seen these.
Maybe not everything, but
some of you could say I like
definitely
this.
tried to.
I mean, if you, I'm trying to think. The best way. You could talk a little bit yourself about something you liked.
Yeah, I try to do that. Yeah,
And
I
does it
do
help?
that. Well, yeah, if I've seen something that I thought was an interesting scene, and I want them to talk about, what they had to do to achieve that, I'll bring it up. And
But you probably know what the best scenes are, I assume. When you ask them the question, don't you already know the answer?
not
I
always.
assume you're in a field in which you look at scenes regularly.
I mean, I suppose I do trust my instincts a lot of times, but I don't necessarily feel like I have, have my arms around everything. So
Well, that also, raises the question: are artists the best ones to talk about their work? And the answer often is no. I say that as an art critic who thinks critics are the best ones. No, I mean, it's funny because last night I watched a documentary it's a new documentary coming out on Ai Weiwei.
Oh, yeah.
And it was interesting. It was just him kind of sitting at home and tinkering around his studio, and there was no outside narrator or critical voice. I always like the critical voice to put things in context. Okay, that doesn't answer your question. How do you get them to think critically? You're asking them to think critically about their work, essentially.
yeah, it's not usually a problem to get them to talk critically. It's once they can hone in.
Yeah.
And like I said, I'll often know
Right,
enough,
say, "I
seen
love
enough
this
to say
scene."
yes. But then I kind of, whenever I just was wondering, when you
I
throw out
thought-
those open-ended things, it just seems to shut them down, and so I try to avoid it. But sometimes you want to know if
I
they're.
thought of something, a way in, process. If you ask them about their process, that's something that people don't get asked about enough and that they really like talking about because they could explain it. I mean, there's an answer. How did you do that scene? That's different than what you're asking. But I think it's a way to open up people who have trouble talking. How did you do this painting? Where did you get that idea, or what kind of pigment did you use? Because if you ever heard even art critics going for studio visits with artists, it's often, that's what they do?
I used to do that.
Yeah, and it's like, and sometimes it's, is this oil paint or acrylic? Those kind of questions really put people at ease because it's something you could talk about, whereas sometimes things are impossible to talk about. Like, what is a painting about? It's a much harder subject. So I think if you ask someone about their process, like childhood, something that will probably generate a pretty warm response on the part of anyone you're speaking to. Yes?
Hi. Well, I apologize for coming in late. I did a piece where I was talking to people from outer boroughs and different ethnicities, and I used a tape recorder, and I was discreet about it, but I wondered if in your experience, people generally get used to it, or if there's some heightened theatricality for it. The second part of the question is when you have to, somebody doesn't want you to take notes, which has happened to me, or I wanted to write about something and I had to race to the bathroom and try to recreate it. So can you just talk about both of those things?
Yeah.
The first question?
Yeah, tape recorders. I mean, tape recorders are an inhibiting factor, without a doubt, especially. But on the other hand, they're incredible to have. I mean, now that we have digital tape recorders, what do you guys think? Does everybody have one? Aren't they amazing? They're so small. I should be taping this lecture. I always carry my tape recorder with me. And I love that you can get such a good recording of somebody's long, convoluted sentences and pauses. That's what's incredible about tape recorders. There's no way taking notes that you can capture somebody's pauses and hesitations. Excuse me?
Do you always tell them that you're recording them? I mean,
oh, well, of course.
You should, yeah, of course.
Of course. So I think generally it is worth the loss of spontaneity on their part to have the tape. I'm all for using a tape recorder. There are some people who won't let you tape. That's okay, then you can't tape. And then you're using their comments presumably on background, or that's a category too. If you just want someone's comments on background, meaning you don't plan to quote them directly, then you don't need the tape recorder. But if you're doing an interview, if you're a writer, it's so great having these tapes because then you can store them all on your computer. Does everybody do this? And I think it's, what I find really incredible is to be able to go back to tapes like a year after you made the recording. If you can keep your tapes in an organized fashion so that you can find them, make sure you label everyone. It sounds obvious, but make sure you label it, put the date on it and the person you interviewed, so that when you need it a year later, just keep buzzing, you can find it. And then I'm amazed when I go back, if you're working on a book, let's say, and you go back to your tapes, you hear things 3 years later that you didn't know enough to appreciate the first time around. And even if I'm doing a quick piece, I like to listen to the tape when I get home, because I find when I'm interviewing, sometimes you're not taking things in, you're focused on the next question, and oh God, I'm running out of time, and he hasn't said what I want him to say yet, I only have 5 minutes left. You're thinking about a lot of things as an interview is going on. You're thinking about the process of the interview, inevitably, and so you may not be as focused on the content of a person's comments as you will be sitting home alone at your desk playing that interview. So I always replay an interview, and then usually that's when I take notes. I write down the comments I think I'll use. I don't do transcripts generally, because they're just a nightmare unless you have, sometimes when my kids were young, they used to actually do transcripts for me. That was fun. They would type up interviews. That ended when they were about 8, but and then or if you're at some fancy operation that will pay for you to get transcripts, I guess that's good too. But I think it's better just to listen yourself and take notes. I've never felt like I needed the entire transcript, and I do go back and listen to old interviews all the time. I have a fantastic archive of interviews, and I'm just, as you get older, you have interviews with people who are no longer here, and they're just great to keep. You never know what part of the interview will be of interest to you.
It also frees you up to take notes of other sights, sounds, facial gestures, things that you can't hear. And then you can just focus on that. For the recording, you can record the speech.
That's interesting, because I bet if you looked at newspaper stories, I bet there's a lot less reporting about facial gestures and clothing, and just more long quotes that obviously came right off the tape recorder. You have to be careful not to just offer a transcription of an interview when you do your piece. You have to remember to observe a person, that's true. But you could take pictures of them with your cell phone and look at the pictures later. That's what I tend to do. I find that so helpful.
What about interviewing people by email?
I love email interviews. I love email interviews.
And a second part of that question is, I think that making the question seem smarter later when you see what the answers are. That's an acceptable thing, I think.
Wait, are you talking about for a Q&A?
Yeah.
Well, if you want to, yeah. Well, first of all, I do like email interviews, because I think that sometimes I'll start with an email interview, and then after we've just gone back and forth, a lot of times then you can call them up and fill things in later on. And if you want to make your question sound smarter, just send it again in the new form.
Why do you like email interviews?
Why do I like email interviews? Because it depends who you're interviewing, obviously. But if you're interviewing somebody intelligent, they can be more concise in an email. I mean, and then you have it forever, and they wrote it, and they're not going to take it back. To me, it's like money in the bank, an email interview. It's like, because if it's spoken, sometimes they'll say, "Oh, I didn't say that." That's why it's very important for me to keep tapes. I always keep tapes for my own protection. And that's why you have to keep them forever and ever. I think I think they're okay. I mean, some people obviously can't express themselves in writing, so you wouldn't want to interview them by email. And they need a little more prodding. But if you're really trying to get some information, it's a pretty efficient way to do it. The Times always says in stories, if you're interviewing someone by email, if the reporter interviews you, then you have to say as the reporter, he said in an email. Okay, so readers reading the story know if a comment was made in an email or in a conversation. And I never liked that. I hate saying he said in an email, because you feel like, well, anybody could send this person an email. You feel like you didn't really do your work somehow. You know, and but I think if you're just trying to get information, it's great. And again, it's there for you to consult over time, which is nice. Yes.
Relatedly, can you talk about phone interviews? And I'm curious what you mostly did for the Q&A column, phone or in person or email.
Yeah. I interviewed everyone in my house, if you can believe it, because I find that if you invite people over, they're much nicer than if you go to their house. And I'm also, you know, I also am a homebody. Whenever I go out to interview somebody, I find it takes the whole day, because like when you go out, it's so much fun. You know, that you're like in a good mood. You go to someone's house, you have coffee, then you buy a shirt on the way back, and there goes the day, and the interview's not that good. I mean, I was amazed. Every time I left my house to do an interview and I had good coffee, like cappuccino, the interview was never good. You know, I was having so much fun because I got to go out, meet somebody interesting, presumably, and, you know, look around their house. You get distracted. You go, oh, wow, these are their books. This is really interesting. Whereas a phone interview, I actually find is better. It's not fun. It's, you know, you really are there for the information, and you're very focused on that, and you're not getting distracted by the idea, oh, here I am drinking coffee with Judy Collins. This is great. You know?
Sounds great.
It's fun, right? That kind of interviewing is fun.
So when you say you did it in your house, you interviewed them on the phone? You had them over?
They were in New York. They would come over.
Okay.
And a lot of people flew in.
Wow.
Will fly, I mean, or they would do it when they were in New York, I'd say. And I would always interview at a table. That's just my preference. I think it's partly because I could see that my tape recorder was on. You could put out a little food, a bowl of nuts or something that I would always end up eating, and the other person would have none, and then I'd say I have to stop putting out these nuts. But I think it's just, it would put people at ease, because a lot of people don't really want you in their house. Like if you say I'm coming over to interview, they're worried, they meant to clean their windows and the bed's not made, and it just creates a lot of outside the interview tensions that you can totally avoid. I'd never interview in restaurants. I'm totally opposed to that, because first of all, it's the same issue of having too much fun and you're not really working on getting good content. If you're in a restaurant, it's just you're eating a meal, you're having a good time. You're not really thinking about getting good material. It's too much fun. It's too enjoyable as you butter your bread and have a drink. And I can't hear anything in restaurants anyway. So I say no, I never do an interview in a restaurant. So they come over, we sit at the table, and that way you're really conscious that you're there to collect information and not just to have fun. Yes, but I was going to say, but when people couldn't come over because they were in Europe or whatever, I like I think phone interviews are pretty good. I would have some really long ones. I mean, hours and hours on the phone. I love digital tape recorders because you can buy one. But, a $15 phone attachment at Radio Shack, and you get a perfect recording of a phone conversation. It's just incredible. So I think phone interviews are fine. And what if you forget to turn on the tape recorder? I'm waiting for someone to ask that. Has that ever happened to any of you?
The batteries.
You what?
The batteries.
Oh, if the batteries are dead. Yeah, like my son. Okay, my son. Now, so he's in Europe. He interviewed this. He's a student, but he interviewed this basketball player, and then he got on a plane, and he says, "Mom, the worst thing in the world happened. I lost my tape recorder." Oh. And he was very excited about this interview with this European athlete. And he said, "Please tell me it happens to everyone. What should I do? What should I do? I could kill myself." He's so upset. He's a junior in college. And, the answer is, what's the answer to that question, everyone? How about, okay, but...
Always take good notes?
I wrote notes. I wrote notes. I remember. write notes of what you remember.
No, well,
Call them. Email or call them.
Call them back. You can't be afraid to go back. And every time you do an interview, you have to add, this is the most important question you ask. How can I reach you tomorrow? How can I reach you next week? Get their phone number, get their email, because you're going to have follow-up questions. We always think of the best question after we leave. That's just universal. That is a fact. It's not until you sit down and put it together, you figure out what the holes are, what you have to ask. And I always call people back, and don't feel guilty.
Even if you've got to redo the whole interview?
Yes. I only had to do that once. Reverend Al Sharpton. And I thought, oh, he talks so much he won't care. I forgot to turn on the tape recorder. He was furious. He said, okay, you got 20 minutes to redo it. But yeah, no, you have to. You're there. What do you think you would do?
Well, in psych training, you do process notes, which means that after your session with someone, you sit down and you write word for word what they said and what you said. And sometimes you're supposed to do
What do you mean, from a tape?
No, just from your head.
From your head,
And
okay.
sometimes you get busy and you don't get to it for a few days. And I find I can go word for word. Just you sit down calmly and you just recollect. And then you work on little areas of I'm forgetting something, and then you work on that over a couple of days to figure it out.
How long are these interviews?
What?
How long are these interviews?
An hour.
Remember?
Okay, but you couldn't you couldn't use somebody's quotation based on your memory of what the person said. You could summarize, but if you need a direct quote.
It's word for word.
But have you ever tested yourself by listening to a recording of it and seeing if you have actually remembered it word for word?
I actually have,
Okay.
because I was working with a team at Bellevue, and patients would come in, and I was very junior at the time, and I was just taking word-for-word notes while other people interviewed the patients. And 4 years later, I was back for the revision of a paper, and they were bringing up a case, and I said, oh, but this person said this and did this gesture, and they said, it's 4 years ago, you can't remember. I said, okay, there are verbatim notes in the file. Sure enough. But that's maybe partly why
That's a
I use
skill.
psychologists.
That's a real skill to be able to. Yes.
Just building on your comment about the re-interview, it's something I've observed in my line of work is the interviewing process actually helps the respondent's own thinking about their own process, why they do things the way they do. So something I've been wondering about lately is whether there's any value in agreeing with the person that there will be a re-interview with the same person on the same topic some period of time later. And I don't know what that ideal period of time is, but to see the similarity and difference between the original and the later, and what that might suggest, or how they come back with more value of the way they talk about their process, if they're a TV director, or
I think that's great. I mean, I think it's really good to say, okay, I'm going to go write my story or write up my report, whatever you guys are doing with this information. And would it be okay if I came back for 30 minutes? I have 30 minutes. You should let them know that it's a limited amount of time. That's okay. In a week or 2 weeks or whatever your schedule demands. And because I find it's all in the follow-up. I always call people back when I did the Q&As, and that's why I got in trouble, because I would call people back and then integrate that in with the information from the first time I did the interview. And then people went after me they said it's all, a big fake out because I make it sound spontaneous, when in fact the interview was done over probably 2 sessions.
What kind of trouble did you get in?
What kind of trouble?
Yeah.
You don't want to hear about that. The first person to really attack me, the first person was Tim Russert. And I know one person. He works at the Metropolitan Museum, and the only time I hear from him is with bad news. So I get an email from Harold, and it says, Tim Russert's on TV attacking you. So I turn it on, and I had done an interview with him, and he was attacking me, and because he was a powerful person, I mean, that's the thing, if you interview a powerful person, you're going to get more shit than if you're interviewing someone, a homeless person in the outer boroughs. No, that's one of the sad facts of journalism, that when you're interviewing powerful people, they get on the phone, they call your editor, and could say whatever they want. So he raised a huge stink at the Times. And as a result, the Times at that point, I was glad I wasn't fired because
So
he
what
was.
Was he saying you misquoted him?
No, he was saying that. Okay, we want to go into this, but I just want to say, ever since then, I will tell you. I'll go back to that in a second. But now at the bottom of the interview in the Times Magazine, it always says interviews are edited and condensed.
Yep. Right.
And that appears at the end of every Q&A at the New York Times.
What does it say?
Interviews are edited and condensed. And I always, assume that's a given. People know that I didn't do if you read a Q&A in the Times, you know that it wasn't done in 15 minutes, right?
Right.
Or maybe you don't know. Don't you assume that I'm picking the juiciest material? Or not?
No, I do. I just am astonished that Tim Russer did
Oh
that.
my God! It was really abusive. Like he really tried to drive me out at that point, and calling everybody. He had just done a book on his father. This was years ago, so I'll try to recall it as best I can. My memory is not like yours.
Well, I think if any of us calms down and just reflects, it can be. I mean, right now on the spot with the film going and all of us here.
Yeah.
But there have been many years of psych trainees who all have to be able to do this.
Yeah, it's very interesting. But why you've obviously decided against using a tape recorder?
You can't miss it.
You can't. Right. I could see why. But anyway, so he had just done a book on his father, Big Russ, okay? And it was Mother's Day. So I thought that it would be fun to ask him for my Mother's Day piece. I needed a pen. Why he didn't write about his mother. Okay? And it was probably a really stupid idea. So I left out, so then he went on and on about his father during the interview, like these endless stories about his father, the fireman, what a hero his father was. And then I said, well, what about your mother? Like, why don't you write about your mother? It was, again, not the most brilliant idea for a piece. And he didn't say much. And then when I did the piece, I left out the stuff about his father. Okay? And I was trying to do a Mother's Day piece. And I thought he would have a sense of humor about it, and he didn't. And he was enraged. So he felt the piece had been unfairly edited. Okay.
Do you think he wanted you to focus on the father?
Yeah.
In his mind, the purpose of this interview was to give publicity to his book.
Exactly.
And when you didn't...
Exactly. He had no sense of humor about it, even though he had gotten so much attention for the book. And it was Mother's Day. He ran on Mother's Day.
Had you told him that it was for Mother's Day?
He would have known that. Because I always, did the interview the week before they appeared, so I'm sure I did.
Probably didn't know it was Mother's Day.
He didn't know. Yeah, he was so not into his mother.
Closer to his father, I think.
that was like one very big disaster. It just took months.
What did you say? Did you say that he didn't mention his mother, or you asked and he wouldn't talk? Or?
He didn't really have any stories about his mother. I think in the piece, again, this was years ago. This was like 2007, and I haven't looked back at it. I think he really couldn't think of any stories about his mother. And I just remember one he told me. And I said to him, that's not a story. And he said, like, he just goes on about his father for hours, and you ask about his mother, and he had nothing to say. But he had one really good story. He said his mother used to wake him up every morning by saying, Russ, Russ. I said, so how is that a story? And he said, well, she didn't even have to say it loudly. She could just say, Russ. And I'm like, that's all you remember about your mother? So he didn't find that funny when he read it in the piece.
Oh, no. Did he at least blame his father for something?
But he was very, he was spiteful. He really wanted to get me fired. He was on the phone with every editor at the paper. And as a result of that, and the public editor did a piece about it, as a result, it was so ridiculous. It was ridiculous to me.
You didn't even damage him. You just didn't give him the publicity he wanted.
Exactly.
That's bizarre.
Well, that's why you always need tapes. That's why you. And after that experience, this is how much influence is. I mean, it's because he's a person of influence. People get pissed off all the time when they're interviewed. You've probably all been interviewed at some point and been unhappy with an interview, but he was just such a baby about it. I shouldn't say this on tape. Hold on. I'm going to delete this part. Anyway, what was I going to say? You know, it's really one journalist versus another.
Yeah.
One journalist versus another. He believed that his approach was superior to mine. Okay? I like my own approach, which assumes that the interviewer is a human being and not just a transcriber of what your subject is telling you. He didn't feel like being subjected to my kind of deconstructive interview, and that was his prerogative. So, is that better? Okay, yes.
But to that end, when you're dealing with people who are, savvy or have their own agenda, how do you disarm them? That's part A. And part B are celebrity gatekeepers.
I always found the hardest people to interview were actors and actresses.
Yes.
To get them off track, woo, that's really work. I mean, if there were journalists here, how many of you are there journalists in the room? Okay, one question. If you can't get them off their track of saying just really banal, let's say it's a person who's just saying banal things, and you think, oh my God, this is so boring, what am I going to do with this? I think one question is to get them to talk about other people's work. That always works. You get something interesting out of it. Because people do not like talking about themselves, as you have found. Sometimes they're apprehensive discussing their own work. But if you ask them what they think of a colleague's work, you often can get some really funny responses. If it's a musician, ask them what they think of, if you're talking to Judy Collins, and what do you think of Mick Jagger? That could lead to some interesting rapport and ideas, because then it's a way of getting them to talk about their field without getting them to in a way, I mean, because that's how we talk. Like when you're talking to a friend, that's how you talk. We talk about other people's work, what other people are doing, and it's a very natural way of conversing with someone else. It's less natural to sit and talk about your own work. So you could ask anyway, what they think. Have they seen this movie? I find that sometimes is a good way in. Ask about things that are in the news. If they don't have any words of wisdom, which you consider great insights, ask them about things that are happening now. Get their sense of what's going on in the world. That could be interesting to read.
I had an incident in which I was interviewing the head of the Japanese commerce of small restaurants.
Oh my God, that sounds like... Already sounds difficult.
He was speaking Japanese, and so he had his own translator.
Oh.
But the problem was the translator did not know very good English.
Oh my God.
So I was pretending not even the whole time. I'm just trying to, pretending I understand what she was saying.
Yeah.
And so when I got out,
you had to use direct quotes?
No, I was just trying to get an idea of what what she was saying. I asked him the question about the small restaurant industry, and then she kind of her English was not good, but that was the only person they had on hand.
Yeah.
And I was like in this room, stuck with him. I was like, oh my God.
That's really funny. Okay, did you have a tape?
No.
Why didn't you tape the conversation?
Because I thought it was just going to be a small, show.
Yeah. You should always carry a tape recorder, because digital tape recorders are so tiny. If you had taped it, then you could have had somebody else. You could have later on listened to it again with somebody who... What do you think? I think always have a tape. And what you lose in spontaneity, you make up for in the ability to really analyze their comments later on. And for me, very helpful. Yes?
I wanted to ask about interviewing somebody that you have a relationship with. I recently interviewed my mom for
That's so
I know, what
intense.
was I thinking?
That's
but it
great
was,
that
it
you
was
did
a
it.
targeted thing. I had dragged her to a museum exhibit, and thought it would just be kind of our reflections. And I was very excited because she's very witty and all of that, and I thought it would be this great intergenerational thing. So we sit down to talk, and I had all my questions, and she was like giving me monosyllabic answers or just very, and I was like, holy shit. And so I realized that I had planned for this to be like a short introduction and then the interview, and then I had to completely, when I transcribed it, I was like, this doesn't work. But also, the other project I'm working on is somebody that I very respect, admire, and that has been both great. It has let me in, but it has also been limiting because, as I was mentioning before, when you hit a wall and they don't, you feel reticent to.
Right, I agree.
So I was curious if you have interviewed people that you have relationships with, and if so, how do you kind of?
I think those are really hard. I think those are the hardest. And one reason the Q&As I was able to be so entertaining is because, why?
Distance.
Because they were one-time interviews, and I wasn't, like, if you are a reporter with The Beat, if you are covering Lincoln Center, every interview is really about gaining access. The next time you have to do an interview, you can't go burning bridges and pissing people off. If you're a beat reporter, you have to get along with the people who you cover regularly so that they'll share information with you. If it's a one-time interview, you don't care if they don't talk to you again. It's true, though. It gives you a lot more freedom. I think it's a good freedom. You're not worried about what will they think of you, or you could really speak the truth. It doesn't matter if they are unhappy, a little bit unhappy with the results, or that if they don't think of you as their best friend, or if they don't invite you to dinner afterwards. It's like it gives you a lot of freedom if it's a one-time interview, as opposed to somebody you're working with on a regular basis. If it's your mother, I would find that very hard. I could see how. Maybe you felt like she was uncomfortable with the whole process.
I thought that she was initially, because I'd been transparent. This is what we're going to do, like down to the mechanics, and it wasn't going to be an emotional interview. We weren't plumbing the depths of our, but it was more capturing our perspectives on an exhibit.
And you didn't want to make her unhappy. She's your mother. You don't want to see her suffer.
Yeah.
So that's, I would say, very hard.
Yeah.
But why were you interviewing her about an exhibition?
It was an exhibition about Indians in America. It was the first one. It was a national one. We attended it together, and we walked through it together.
Yeah.
And so I was interviewing her because I thought what she took away from it and what I took away from it would be different.
Yeah.
And it would be also an opportunity for her to share. And I think she
Time
was
to wake
thinking
up.
about what I wanted to hear.
Yeah.
I think it wasn't even just me. It was, I could tell that she was trying to sometimes be more black and white about things, or
She was uncomfortable. She's maybe an older world person than you are, whereas now we're all comfortable, pretty much, recording our thoughts and being photographed and living a more public life than our parents were. Yes, go ahead. Are we? Is this having any coherence at all? I'm worried that we're all over the place. We'll have to think of some big unifying themes at the end. That's important. You have to think of the unifying themes at the end. You have to say, what was this all about? So we will get to that if you can stand waiting.
I wanted to, if you wouldn't mind, go back to a phrase you used a few minutes ago. You said, be a good listener.
Yeah.
So could you define that? What does that mean to you?
Right. Okay. Well, you probably have friends who never listen, and you probably have friends who listen all the time. All of you. Okay? You have there are type of friends who never hear a word you say, but we tolerate them anyway because they're fun or they offer something else. Isn't that true?
Yeah.
And there are other Wait, what do they offer?
Oh no, sometimes I wonder why I Yeah, I do have that question in my life with certain friends. Like, they never listen, so.
Right.
Yeah, I have to just admit that to myself here in public.
Right. Yeah. And then you have friends who are amazingly empathic. Like they're very interested in hearing about your latest fight with your mother or whatever you're talking about, your latest trauma at the office or your latest, you feel rejected because this happened today. I mean, there are friends who will listen to hearing you talk about whatever you feel like talking about that day. And we all know who they are, right? You're the good friend, the friends who are good listeners, like somebody you would call if something bad happened to you. You know what, Joan Rivers, she turned out to be really interesting. Mm-hmm. She was the warmest person I ever interviewed. It was incredible. And she said about friends, I thought this was funny. I don't know if it's true. But she said, the thing is, you only need friends when you're down. You don't need friends when you're up. She wasn't being funny. She was being totally serious. When my career is going well, I'm just on the road and working with audiences. Who needs friends? But when you're down, you need people to talk to. And she has all her old friends, like her hairdresser. She has a lot of ashes in her closet. She keeps cremated remains, of her hairdresser, her husband, a lot of people.
She get her hairdresser's ashes.
How did she get that?
That's a story.
But she seemed like she seemed like one of the warmest people I ever interviewed, and but anyway, listening. What was I? She listened, she seemed very emotionally aware. But wait, we have to answer one question. What was the question? Listening. How do you listen? We all know a good listener means you have to care about what the person is saying. Don't drift off. And sometimes that's work. Sometimes the person's being boring. Don't think about, I have to go buy this for dinner tonight while they're talking. Just really listen carefully. And don't drift away. And try to understand where they're coming from. You're trying to understand a person. In that sense, you're being a psychologist. You're not there to judge them, usually. You're there to understand what they're doing. And most lives are pretty complicated and have a lot of parts. So, I'm often amazed how long it takes for me to understand, until something clicks, until I really understand what someone's doing, or, yes.
When you listen, do you interrupt people by saying sounds? I get it.
That's such a good question. Do you nod your head? Because I find sometimes, I saw myself on TV recently, and I'm sitting here like this, and I thought I looked like one of those bobbing head dolls. TV interviewers do not bob their heads. They just sit still. So that's a very funny question. I mean, what is the appropriate, let's try, okay, I'm going to talk to you. So let's try bobbing your head. As I'm talking. Is that comforting or annoying or what?
I think sometimes it's comforting to me to nod a little. It's just a way of saying, I'm listening.
Right. Yeah, I'm a nodder. But it looks ridiculous. If you're ever on TV, stop the nodding and just hold your head still.
There's also the nodding acknowledges, as you say, with you. So if you don't do it, do you actually stop people in their story, or can you do other things?
I think it's good to nod and say, or that's interesting, or, to acknowledge that you're listening, I think is fine. But on TV, just watch. Nobody nods their head when they're interviewing people. Judy Woodruff nods?
Yeah. The camera always goes to her when she's going like this.
That's hilarious. She's a nodder.
What?
Yeah. She's a nodder.
It's a sign
it's
for the camera.
It's an acknowledgement, and the camera will go to her that she's agreeing with the person.
Judy Woodruff nods. What about Diane Sawyer? What if it's a female thing? Wouldn't that be horrible?
But they might have pulled that nod out of context, They've got one camera on her collecting all these nods.
Maybe it's stock footage of her nodding.
Different tracks.
Something better. Yes.
Okay, I'll follow up on the interruptions. If what the person is saying
you really decide you're going to go off your track and try to elicit more from them, you could do that, but not interrupt exactly what they're talking. Charlie Rose.
Oh yes. What's
drives
wrong?
me up the wall.
Wait, what does he do?
Charlie Rose will not. He will ask a question and then he'll start to answer it for the person, or interrupt them.
Been doing it for 25 years.
And if I ever meet him on the street, I'm going to please
let
them answer the question.
Terrible.
Well, did you ever notice?
Yeah, better than he used to be when he started. He was much
But he's a great
Yeah.
interviewer, and I try to learn from his technique. I watch his technique, and you have to listen, because if someone says something and you want to follow that up, you need to be there with them.
But he doesn't have a lot of follow-up. I find he's better on politics than on artistic and literary people.
Really bad.
And so, like, if he's doing arts, he will never ask. He had Richard Serra on for an hour.
So bad on a lot of this stuff.
And he didn't ask Richard Serra where he's from. And Richard Serra happens to have a really fascinating childhood. You know, when his mother committed suicide, and he's half Jewish. And Charlie Rose just let him go on, talking about his work, and people loved it. A lot of people loved the interview. It's not my kind of interview.
He doesn't research enough.
He does, exactly.
And he makes terrible mistakes, which you only find out when you know the subject.
Do you think that's because he has to do an interview a day, and like TV just doesn't put the same emphasis?
Yes. And he interrupts so much. I mean, Warren Beatty literally told him to shut up and said, "Are you going to let me talk? Stop talking. Let me talk now."
Warren Beatty never shuts up either. He talks a lot. I interviewed him once. We were on the phone till like 5 a.m. Yeah.
I was hoping that you would come back to the big unifying theme, like after, if an interview is an hour and a half, I don't know any that really run that much longer, I don't know, before people start fidgeting, do you come back to what you want to come back to and how you circle around that and make it happen?
Why do you say an interview is never longer than an hour and a half?
Well, I'm wrong about that.
I mean, an interview for what? Let's say, or
if you're doing a book review, or sometimes it's not about someone's life and their whole career, but as much as a focused
the latest
subject.
Project.
Yeah.
I think for me, the theme really doesn't become evident until I go home into my bedroom, listen to the tape, try editing it, and it's later that it becomes evident. To me, not always, but generally I'm pretty slow, and I have to, it's really not till you start writing or playing around with material that you figure out, oh, this is what this is about, or this is what I should have said. And that will help me structure an interview. With the Q&As and the Times, they were very short. They were only 800 words. So I would, it was always a question of what am I going to throw out? You'd have to throw out so much. It was ridiculous. I tried to get 2 pages. I begged for a 2-page spread instead of 1 page. And, forget it. Nobody was interested in that. And, I mean, my editors were not. They liked the 1-page format. And readers like it because it's short. I mean, it's great for people with ADD. Anybody can read 800 words. And so when you're what about that, when you're trying to decide what to throw out? That's a similar question, because that helps you define your theme. And basically you throw out everything you can, except for the stuff that absolutely has to be there, because it says something. So I never really left quotes in just because they were fun. It kind of killed me. I had to throw away a lot of fun material, off-the-cuff observations, but I think I always wanted things that helped me establish my goal, which was to find a correlation between the life and the work. Why is this person doing this work? Why is this person doing this kind of architecture? Why is this person writing this kind of fiction? And I'm sure, you can't achieve that in every interview, but that was always my goal. I needed a certain amount of information to convey something about their background. And then, what was the question?
Well, when you first started today, you talked about being well prepared and having read, and that something will interest you
as you're reading.
As you're reading, and you're going into the interview. So what I'm hearing now is that sometimes the theme doesn't really crystallize
could change. The theme
until
could change.
You get home, and then something they've said really kind of either
shifts your view,
right?
And you see something that you didn't see before, and then you could kind of edit the interview accordingly and call them back. I'm very big on calling people back. My son, by the way, who lost his tape recorder, would not call the athlete back.
Oh.
He just was too embarrassed. He said, I don't want to tell him that I lost my tape recorder, because he's a student. I said, tell him it was stolen.
Exactly.
I said, say someone stole your backpack. No, Mom, I can't.
I have a related story. I had interviewed Ravi Shankar.
Okay.
He was in London and I was here, and he was almost in his 80s. And I lost the whole interview.
Oh.
And it was terrible because it had to be in his words.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how to. I had interviewed him many times before, but I was so embarrassed to call him. Finally, I called him up. I remembered every word, but I called him up and I said, I just couldn't cheat and make it up, So I said, this is what happened. My computer crashed. I've lost the whole interview, and can we do it again? And tell me your memories. And he said, he repeated almost verbatim what he had said earlier, but he prefaced it with a laugh. He was so charming.
Yeah.
He said, such things happen in America also. Yeah. And then he repeated the whole thing, and it was almost better than what he had said earlier. So sometimes, your son should have called.
You should always call back.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be afraid to call people back. You have to have that kind of, phone nerve when you're doing interviews. Yes.
I've never had the advantage of that endless time. I've always been offered 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Sometimes they've ended up giving me an hour when they've booked 30 minutes. But how do you then handle, you have to be fairly precise.
I've had people say you have 10 minutes. I've done some of those Q&As really fast with politicians. Who was the one who said you have 10 minutes? Okay, well, the way you have to do that, obviously, that's a different kind of interview. You have to, I never write out questions in advance. You have to kind of know what you want to ask. You have to have a good sense of that. You have to ask that up front. And then you have to hook them by asking them questions that keep them on the phone. Even though they say they have 10 minutes, and suddenly we say, tell me about your grandparents, they're not going to hang up. Tell me about your childhood. Save that for the end as a way of prolonging the interview. Or whatever it is you think they might like to talk about. Something more personal. That's a trick, too, trying to prolong. Right. Sometimes you're trying to end the interview.
Yeah.
And then sometimes you're trying to prolong it. Yeah. But I find that most people are glad to find somebody who will listen to them. We were talking about being a good listener. We all feel like no one listens to us. My kids never listen to me. My husband never listens to me. My mother doesn't listen to me. So when interviewers listen to me, because I just did this book and was interviewed a few times, I was like, wow. It feels luxurious that somebody will sit there for hours listening to you. It's a nice experience. And so you should, people will appreciate if you're a good listener. And I think they will tell you things. What's so funny? Because most of us are not listened to that much. Right? Or unless you all are surrounded by great listeners. But I just find people, we're busy and no one even talks on the phone anymore. I hate when people call me. And I feel kind of guilty because the first half of my career, I think all I did was talk on the phone. Every day there were writers I talked to, and we don't do that anymore. And when somebody calls, I'm like, do they think I have nothing to do but talk on the phone? Are you all like that too?
Yeah.
So I don't feel so guilty?
Yeah.
And what about friends who call you at night?
Don't answer.
Don't answer. Well, I think fewer people answer their phones now. Isn't that true? We check to see who it is?
Yeah. Caller ID.
Caller ID. Okay, yes?
I once did a project, it was ill-fated for this reason. I did a project with somebody who was a maid guy, and I would ask him a maid guy, he was a mobster, and I would ask him questions, and he said, I can't answer.
Yeah.
So it was like, I said, if we're doing this project together, you have to talk to It was ill-fated, but I didn't, I couldn't, everything had to be off the record or he wouldn't answer it because he didn't want to incriminate himself.
Right.
So it didn't end up happening, you know. And I showed him a collaboration agreement, like, you know, any way around that. That's a very specific question. And then the second question, I keep asking two-part questions because the second specific to genre is I've interviewed sports figures or sports people.
They're terrible.
I mean,
Sports
the most
are the worst.
cliched, the worst sound bites.
And
Is there any way good?
They're divas. They say 15 minutes. They never want to give you any time.
Well, they
5 minutes.
They speak in cliches, you know, and people who are really good at talking to the press, like Joe Girardi, you know, it's all sound bites, you know. So I guess two questions: the mobsters and the sports people.
Okay, I think athletes are the worst to interview. I found that they were doing you a favor. They don't need you. They don't need you. You know, they have built-in audience, and it was very hard to get fresh material. But again, ask them what they think of other athletes. That you could get some funny comments that way. Get them to criticize other performers, their colleagues. Ask them a question that has to generate an interesting answer. Ask them about people they hate. If you know they don't like somebody, say, what do you think of this team owner? And if you're just trying to get something entertaining out of them.
I'm sorry, I'm writing actually a biography on an athlete, but I do think there is a case where there's often a bias towards some athletes that they're seen as dumb, so they get stereotyped by journalists often, so they're so used to responding to mundane questions that it becomes almost programmed for them.
Well, but also sports media. I mean, if you read sports sites, a lot of it is just like, I just can't, or even, you know, like sports is always on in my house because I have 2 sons. And so so it's always, what is it? What's the sports station? ESPN is always on. I'm like, I cannot believe, like, coaches come out and say, you know, and they stand there, and it's a press conference, they say, great game. This was a great game. And that's the end of the press conference. You know, like, less is said in sports than in any other realm of endeavor in this country, I would have to say. So getting athletes, you know, they're not encouraged to say anything.
There are some, I mean, there's just often, they're just not encouraged, not seen that way, so they actually get pigeonholed, and it becomes a cycle.
Yeah, so I'm sure that's very hard to do, to interview. And in terms of mobsters, okay, in terms of difficult subjects, you have several possibilities. The easiest one for me, what I would do is, if I was on deadline, I was talking to someone who's just being a total jerk, make that the subject of the interview. Yeah. You know, they don't answer it, so then you say, again, let's say it's a Q&A, you could say, why, you don't want to answer that? Leave all that stuff that often ends up on the cutting room floor in the interview. I mean, this is...
Frank Sinatra has a cold. I mean, that was the famous Frank Sinatra has a cold.
Right.
He never got the interview.
Right. So you could...
I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, not at all, not at all. But I'm just saying that if you're dealing with a difficult subject, call attention to that in the piece. If you have to include this person, let's say it's somebody who's a public figure, you can't just discard it and go on to the next one. If you have, then call attention to the fact that the person's being difficult. You should always do that, and that gets you completely off the hook. So then it doesn't look like you're a bad interviewer who couldn't get anything out of that person, but that the person is a reluctant subject. There's nothing wrong with pointing that out in a piece. And I'm sure 1 out of every 4 of my pieces was really about working with a difficult subject, such as Gore Vidal, who just did nothing the whole time during our interview other than insult the New York Times. You know, and some people would think, God, when is this interview going to begin, right? Because he would say things like, I can't trust the Times. You know, 30 years ago they reviewed a book of mine. You know, so a lot of people actually, you know, I'd have to work through their feelings about the Times before the interview began. Like I'd sit down and say, Michi reviewed my book 17 years ago. I'm feeling negative, and can you do anything about that? It was unbelievable, you know, because people have such fraught feelings towards the Times. And so, you know, with Gore Vidal, he couldn't get beyond that. So I just used that material. You could always use the resistance as the subject of the piece, if all else fails.
Yeah, can I ask a question just related back to this theme of listening? I'm just curious, since you do so many interviews, how does it affect your social conversational style? Do you find yourself interviewing friends and people in more kind of just run-of-the-mill social situations?
Well, I think that I became an interviewer because I'm a naturally either inquisitive or nosy person. I don't know which it is, but I just like I love hearing people talking on the street. Even, you know, when I listen to cell phone conversations, And if you're like that, if you have a kind of novelistic curiosity in other people, then you'll probably be a better interviewer. Because I'm sure there are some interviewers who just want to get right to the facts. The obvious content of an interview, right? And that's good too. That's really important. I mean, if you're covering New York City School Board, you have to get right to the facts. But again, if you have a broader curiosity about people, what was I going to say? I think people who are curious become journalists. I've always wanted to read a study on curiosity, and nobody's done it. If any of you are looking for book ideas, what's it, buddy?
I'm always looking for book ideas.
I think that would be a really good book. A book on curiosity. Is anyone studying it? Why do some people ask questions and others don't? Is it truly a sign of intelligence? Because I know smart people who never ask questions. It's not like, teachers always say, oh, the smart ones ask the questions. There are some smart people who never ask anything and have no curiosity about anyone else. So I don't know. I don't know what the connection in curiosity and intelligence is.
I think there's a talk at Penn on curiosity, actually. I think I remember seeing it.
There's a TED talk on curiosity?
I think a Penn talk.
Oh, a Penn talk?
Yeah, this week. I'm pretty sure there was.
Really?
I might be wrong, but I think I saw
Well, I started looking it up the other day, just for like an hour, just wondering what had been done. And most of the study was kind of neurological. Which, I thought I'm not that interested in, like, which part of the brain asks questions. A lot of people are. If you want, no, really, if anyone wants to do a book on that. And what's interesting is that, like, every religion has different approaches to curiosity. So many Catholic people I interviewed have told me that when they were little, the nuns were screamed at them for asking questions. Yeah. It's amazing how many people mention that, just totally randomly. Catholic said, I asked the Sister Agnes, if God exists, and she said, oh, don't ask that question. Catholics were always taught not to ask questions, whereas Jewish people,
ask
the Talmudic question, right? The Talmudic tradition is about asking questions, so you could say, right, maybe it is. Actually, there's something ancestral among Jews about asking questions. But I mean, no one has ever put all that together, and I think it would be a great book if anyone is looking to do.
You should do it.
You do it.
Yeah, why
do
don't
a book
you
on.
write that?
Well, right now I'm looking for a new book.
There you go.
You think so? But would you really want to read a book about curiosity?
Yes. It's like a Jonah Lehrer idea.
Oh no, don't say that. Okay, get it, right. Well, it was funny, I mentioned it to an editor. I am so indiscreet, you could see. You know how people never tell you what they're working on? I mentioned it. No, I had lunch recently with the person who's the editor of Kindle Singles. I don't know if you know what Kindle Singles are. They're like 30-page essays that Kindle sells as kind of mini books, and I thought maybe I would try it for that.
Don't do it for Kindle Singles.
Don't do it?
No, do a book.
Oh, you
no, they don't get a book deal after you do it for Kindle Singles.
Wait, what's wrong? I wanted to try Kindle Singles.
Amazon.
Wait, what's wrong?
No, do it for your publisher.
But why? I have a
30
publisher,
pages isn't long.
which is for R. Strauss and Giroux. I have very good.
Do it for R. Strauss.
Wait, but why don't you like Kindle Singles? I think
I don't like Amazon.
Because it's just why be right an Amazon scribe. Because I feel like that could be something interesting. Kindle Singles,
You
the
can
fact
write a
that
short book, and then you can publish it as a digital short.
yeah, because magazines have really have been so decimated lately, like newspapers, that I thought, if there's somebody willing to publish any 30-page essay, and that's what Kindle Singles is, and sell them for 99 cents a piece, and then you get to keep. The way they work it is there's no advance. The writer keeps 70%. And I thought, could that be an interesting way to explore ideas that are not going to appear in the New York Times Magazine or the New Yorker, because maybe they're a little bit off the news, not as timely as other stories. But you say no.
But how would you feel about doing a lot of work with no guarantee of any royalty, with no?
It's called my life.
Yeah.
We all do that. We all do that. I mean, in advance, don't we? Anyone in this room is a writer.
Latin America. How does it work? Do you know?
How do I feel? I think advances, for those of you in publishing, are they're good, but but
they're
not
disappearing. They're good, but they're disappearing.
But they're good. Okay, if you write a book that you think could actually sell, then you don't need a big advance. Then just go write it and sell it.
Right, but
it's a good guarantee in case the book is a bomb. Then at least you have something, right?
Because there's so many variables involved in how well a book is published.
I agree. It's just a total crapshoot.
What about, you don't recommend Kindle singles, what about self-publishing your book and selling it on Amazon for Kindle at 99 cents? I mean,
that is a Kindle single.
Oh, it is? Okay, because we've all read newspaper articles.
I mean, I'm a different generation, so I have a different attitude about self-publishing, but other people swear by it, and obviously the chicken soup for the soul, there are things that are not, just chicken soup for the soul that are self-published that do well, or that find a publisher, or the next book finds a publisher.
Did you ask your question yet?
No, I didn't. But you touched it briefly. My question is, how much do you prepare your question in advance, and how much do you let the conversation take its place?
I never prepare questions in advance, but I really read a lot. So I might have one question, something I genuinely want to know, but don't go through a list of questions. I think just have an open-ended conversation, and you need information, and you also need information not just about the person, but about their field. That's more important. If you want to enlarge your subject, again, it depends on what kind of interview you're doing, but have some insight into how the whole field is going, so you can see what their comments mean in some larger context. Everything has a larger context.
But don't you think that's just because of your experience? So that somebody younger might have to start out with maybe not like a whole list of questions, but maybe, you're going in with the memory and the experience of having done millions of interviews.
No, I think the only time you need to write it out is if someone says you have 15 minutes and you want to make sure you don't forget to ask about their last divorce or something. You write it all down.
You don't even have notes that you bring in?
No.
No notes.
What about ice breaking? Ice breaking. I always find hard, like the first question. Then the interviews.
Well, I think you should always start off by saying something nice to the person. Either you like their work, and if you don't like their work, then you have to think of something else to say. You could say, "It's nice meeting you," or "I've known about you for a long time. Great to finally meet you," because it's put them at ease. And in terms of, and usually you're there to talk about a specific project anyway, so that should be the icebreaker. Usually there's something newsy pulling you in. If you're a journalist, their latest game. Are you a sports writer?
Yeah.
Their latest game. So that's so easy with athletes, isn't it? To say great game last night?
Yeah.
Or not?
That's the usual.
Right.
Between the ice breaking and the first question,
yeah.
I think I find always hard. Then the interview goes winning and.
Right, and do you usually ask about their childhoods?
No, not usually.
But you would get a lot of new information about athletes.
That's how it goes. Like I find it hard to have a long time interviews. It's a carousel, a media carousel. You have 5 minutes, and it's really hard. When you have the time to do a profile, find it easy because they're not used to get those questions. But if you have 5 minutes and you ask the same,
okay, so ask something different. Ask them if they believe in God.
Oh.
Ask them. That's a good one. If you want to get something new, and people love discussing that. I also, if they've ever seen a shrink, you'd be surprised. People love discussing that. You look alarmed.
A shrink.
If they've ever seen a shrink.
Okay.
What do you think?
String.
No.
That's fine.
Ask them just those are, you could say, are you religious? Or I find a lot of people like talking about religion. Once I got a furious letter from somebody who said, why do you ask people their religion? That's so rude. And I think in the old days, a generation ago, people did not discuss their religion in public, but we live in a more ethnic world now and a more tolerant world, and we like hearing about other people's ethnicity, religions, and practices, and that could be interesting. I guess it's not the natural question to ask an athlete. What is a good question to ask an athlete?
I don't know. It depends on if you're doing an interview or you are just after the game. How was the game? You just watch it. But it's the usual question. They're always.
Well, and they're used to being asked questions that the interviewer answers, like, how great was that last shot at the buzzer? Well, it was great, you know.
That's sports. I know,
yeah.
that's what sports TV is like. That's all day, just that. It's incredible.
Can you ask them how it is being so rich and famous all of a sudden?
That's a softball. Because it...
Well, it also could be classes for racist or...
Right. Or just the difference between how they grew up and how they are now, and how they got there and how they're coping.
Right. No, that's...
Or how they prepare for the game. A lot of them might have some superstitious rituals.
That's true. That's a good, I think that's a good specific question.
You also have to research the person. Like in any interview, you find out about them, and you'll, like you said, you'll find something that will trigger interest on your part.
Right.
You can dig at that, and if it's something no one else has asked, it's going to be there'll be a lot of interest in it. Because everybody's used to the same quotes from athletes, so you treat them just don't treat them like an athlete. Look at another angle.
But again, athletes are, they feel like they don't have to answer your questions. That's how they're different from other people also. They could just shrug it off. So it's hard to come up with a question that would interest them. And thank you guys for coming. What time is it, by the way?
2:45.
It's 2:40?
Yeah, 2:40.
So it's what time? We started at
1.
At 1.
I think we go
In this sense, until 3. Okay, so now we're going to have to find the grand theme. This has been total chaos. And we must find, if we were going to write this up, go ahead. But you look familiar to me. What's your name?
Naomi Danis. I work for Lilith.
You work where?
Lilith magazine.
Okay.
Jewish Feminist magazine. But I wanted to ask 2 questions. One was about reading back, the etiquette of reading back quotes to people. And the other one was, are there people that you have not interviewed that you would like to interview?
Reading back quotes. How does everyone feel about that? The Times has a policy against it, by the way, but I am in favor of reading back quotes when I'm working on my books. I send people the entire section and ask them to fix it because it's really hard. It is so hard to get everything right. You agree?
I agree. You'll send, in addition to the quotes, the whole narrative?
Well, for I just wrote a biography of Norman Rockwell, for instance. So I, like one section is on Erik Erikson, who was Rockwell's psychoanalyst, actually. And I took that entire section. It was more than a section, about 45 pages, and sent it to Erikson's son, Kai Erikson, who's very smart. And I knew he would have an interest in reading it. He's a writer himself. And I'd say, can you read this for errors? And he wrote back something kind of insulting. And I thought, okay, well, he said that's all there is. He wanted more. And I thought, well, it's not a book about Erik Erikson. So that could happen too. Oh yeah, I'm remembering there's a musician, Al Cooper, in my book. He said, like, you left out all my good stories. Sometimes you'll just get that. People want to know, why isn't there more? And
or they want to rewrite it.
That's another category. And that's not going to work either.
Yeah.
But a lot of times they will catch little errors. So when I'm working on my books, and there you make your own rules when you're writing a book or a Kindle single, which maybe I shouldn't do. You make your own journalistic rules. When you're working for a publication, they have rules that you have to follow. But I do think there's so much to be gained from reading back. And sometimes people might take away something. That's the price. They might take something away. There's always that risk. They'll say, you cannot say that. But usually when they say that, it's not anything important anyway. It's usually, so I like to have, it depends. If you're writing something where you feel like factual accuracy is essential, I think it is helpful to fact check your own material. The New Yorker reads back quotes. Do you realize that? The New Yorker fact checkers call up subjects and read the quotes back. What do they do? What do they do when someone wants to change the quotes? I have no idea. I'm sure they say no, but there must also be a little bit of negotiation.
Why does the New York Times not do it?
Yeah. Why does it not do it?
Why does the New York Times not do that?
And they're really strict. Like, you get in trouble if you do it. If you're a journalist and you do that. Because they feel like you shouldn't be negotiating with the subject of the interview. You did the interview, they said this, don't give them the chance to take it back, fix their quotes, fix the grammar, and that it compromises the purity of the interview. What do you think? You're an editor.
I'm very aware that people who are written about or quoted feel like it's everything about how they're presented to the world. It feels like a similar thing to not letting authors sometimes pick the headline, the title of their story, because they feel it's their story and it's their life. But we try to pick a title not to ruin their life, but to make somebody read the article.
Right.
So
headline complaints. That's a big category.
But if it's somebody important and you ever want to re-interview them again, it helps. Also, if they're famous and they're very precise. I interviewed Amartya Sen, and he said, I would appreciate your reading it back to me. And when I read it back, I made a friend for life. I can call him up anytime at home, and he will give me a quote or a soundbite. And he told me, he said, most Indian journalists don't read back. And that's just because they're lazy or sloppy or don't have the time. He said he has been very disappointed. And for me, it was very helpful to read it back to him, because he was talking about such complicated economic subjects that if he corrects it, it's helpful.
I agree with you entirely. I think the whole idea that you can't read back assumes that journalists get everything right, that they're all powerful. It's ridiculous. And I would like to see that policy change. I think all quotes should be read back to people. I also Bob Caro, who's a friend of mine. Do you know Robert Caro, the biographer? When my Rockwell book came out recently, the family was complaining about it, and he said, they kind of attacked it actually, and he said the only thing that you could do in a situation like this, if you think people are going to be that unhappy, make sure they know beforehand. They shouldn't really find out by reading something in the paper or reading your book. And so if you tell them the quotes that you're using, that's another way of preparing them. If it's an unfavorable story, that's different. But I agree. I think, the downside is, what would you do if the person you're reading the quotes to said you may not use that? I said that, I never said that, take that out. You could get into that kind of nightmare.
That's when you need your tape recorder.
The tape recorder.
You can say you've said it on the record. Why should I take it back?
I can't take it out. Right, my editor won't let me take it out.
Right.
Imaginary editor won't.
It's harder when you read it back to someone who's not that important, or for whatever reason decides to rewrite the whole thing. And I've had that happen several times, and I'm very tough about that. I say no rewriting. I do the writing.
Well, your approach sounds like total common sense. And that rarely exists in the world. No, people get very caught up and very pious about their policies and approaches. And I think I take a pretty common sense approach to, journalists are very fallible people. And when you interview someone, you're trying to understand something difficult. And I do think you want to check and make sure you got things right. So I'm with you. I don't feel compromised if I, send people material to go over and to get their feedback before I publish it. I think that I think that the material gains more than it loses if you do that. You can lose a little bit over time because somebody could take a quote away from you. But I think you gain more than you lose. To gain in accuracy is a huge thing. To be accurate is a huge thing. It's very hard to get all the facts right in a story. And really, to me, that's what distinguishes good writing from shoddy journalism. Good journalism from bad is good writing. You understand the importance of getting everything right. And you're writing something that you want people to believe because you believe everything in it is correct. And I think working with the person, going over quotes and information, is an incredible boon for fact checkers in the fact checking process. Yes?
Yeah, hi. Everyone keeps saying re-interview. I work at Penn and I wouldn't be doing my job well if I didn't plug an event tomorrow night that I think would interest you. There's this thing called the re-interview, and Michael Stipe and Martin Amis are going to look back at interviews they gave to Interview magazine like 10 years ago, 25 years ago, and comment on it.
Oh, that's
and the whole process.
That's very interesting. You had a re-interview, right?
Yeah.
Right. All right. So now, if we had to sum up this, let's say this was a story. Okay, we're writing a story about this. What do you think we arrived at? It's like about all the points out here on the table now. I hate the phrase "on the table." Of everything said, if we wanted to emphasize something, I have in my head what I would emphasize. Does anybody else? What would you say is the theme? If we wanted to make a point.
How to get what you want and not get fired.
How to get what you want and not get fired. I wish I knew the answer to that question. Yes. What do you think?
Would you repeat that one?
Said how to get what you want and not get fired.
Okay. Mine would be deep listening.
Deep listening.
I think that listening is a technique.
It is.
On its own. And when I lose track, my mind's off somewhere, that's those which has happened once in a while because my interviewing was boring or something.
Yeah. And we all have a lot on our minds.
Yes, that always. That's key to me. I mean, that's the whole thing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let me just yes.
I would say, in summing up my impression of your approach, it would be that interviewing is about establishing a relationship with the other person.
Okay.
And everything grows from that.
Okay, so now what I would say, these are all interesting, I mean, any of them are possible, let's say, approaches to, if we were doing an article about interviewing, do you want to contribute?
Yeah, where do life and work get together?
Yeah, life and work, okay. All right, now, let's say we were going to go with deep listening. You want to do, okay, that was the theme of the piece. The theme is going to be deep listening. What I would think immediately is the larger context. You could say, do we live in a world in which no one listens? In which everyone is barking at us from the TV screen.
Everyone's
constantly.
distracted.
Right, a world of distraction, deep listening. So you could kind of work out a theme there, right? For a piece. Is interviewing the only context in which people listen anymore? Is that possible?
It separates the professional from whatever.
Yeah, but okay, so that's one theme. Okay, life versus work. Okay, so that's, anyway, all of these could be developed into not just a point, but into a way of thinking about the way we live now, in a way. And I think it's always good to try to look at the larger picture because it keeps your work, so hard to say. But I think it's very possible to write about people in the most personal terms and not be trivial. And that's always my goal. You know, you could get the personal details and they matter, they're interesting. But how do you enlarge a piece? So what's the larger? So ask a larger question, like, do people listen anymore? Ask a question about how we live now. Relationships, that's interesting. So think of that as, what would the question be? If you wanted to do a piece about relationships, you could say, are the best relationships interview relationships? The only ones that work, interview relationships. Something you always try to focus, I think, on the question that interests you.
Well, I mean, to me, the takeaway, I'm purposely using a cliche, would be that this was a successful workshop because basically with the master interviewer, we all asked questions. We all became great question askers. And, you know, I didn't think it was going to be a lecture, but I didn't know you would be so freeform in allowing our curiosity to come to the fore.
Well, maybe I was, you could say I was unplanned. I should plan better.
No, it's a workshop.
My older son just came to a lecture about my book recently. I brought him to a bookstore downtown, and at the end, I said, "What do you think?" He said, "Mom, you need some talking points."
No. You absolutely inverted what I said, which was the reason why this was such a brilliant workshop was you allowed us to ask questions of the master questioner.
Okay, now you just called me on my behavior. I thought that was really good when you said you inverted what I said. It's like, you know, it's tiresome when people turn everything into a self-deprecating joke. Okay, I have that tendency. And you called me on it. That's really good. You have to be, you know, if you listen carefully, you will see you learn a lot about your subject from listening. Okay, so good luck. Oh, yes. One more question.
I was just going to add to your, what makes a great interview is start a conversation. I mean, it sounds simple,
that's true.
But it's not just going in with these predetermined questions that you have to run through. It involves listening, involves give and take, it involves having the person trust you.
Exactly. And they're going to want to hear about you too. I mean, you have a conversation, offer your ideas, and don't feel like you have to sit there like a machine.
I also think you did something really nice at the beginning of the interview where you sort of planted this image of the torture chamber because I mean that's what you said, you don't need to torture people to get them to talk. That was really also what this was about, so I think that was also was nice.
Well, thank you. This is also complimentary. I'm used to being attacked, so I don't know how to respond. Thank you so much. That's really nice.
I apologize for taking us away from the big picture wrap up, but I had one more question.
Go ahead.
About interviewing, and I'm wondering.
But that's like the kicker. After the big theme, you always need.
Because I have a feeling there are a lot of journalists here. I'm not a journalist, I'm a biographer. So when you're interviewing for your biographies and your books, are they different in style or substance from your journalistic interviews? And how?
Yeah, very, very different. Very different. Because if you're interviewing about the past, the distant past, if you're writing a biography, you're interviewing someone about something that may have happened 50 years ago or 30 years ago. So it's very different. And I often find people really can't remember anything. So if I'm interviewing for a biography, when I was working on Norman Rockwell, for instance, sometimes the anecdotes were just so ridiculous. Like people would say, I visited him in his house in Lenox. Okay, he never lived in Lenox. And we went in his pool. He didn't have a pool. I mean, things were that off because it's so hard to remember. So when you're interviewing about the distant past, I think it's very good to ask people to, I would say like, well, what did he look like and what was he like? What was his manner like? Because then that description has to be true. Whatever they say is true. So there's less emphasis on facts, I think, when you're interviewing about the distant past and more about a general style of being. I know, when people recall things that happened 10,000 years ago, I think you're just, unless you could confirm it independently, it just all belongs to the realm of anecdote.
But anecdote tells you a lot.
Right, but you have to, as a biographer, I often feel like I'm collecting puzzle pieces and none of them fit. You end up with 1,000 pieces that don't fit. And I mean, it's interesting then you talk about the spaces between the pieces. You say, well, this person says this and this person says that, and you don't know which it is. You acknowledge that there are gaps in the story. Okay. So that's all. So you're acknowledging when you're writing biography, I think, just how difficult it is in a way to piece together a narrative. Whereas if you're writing a story about a subject who's sitting in the room with you, you should be able to piece together a smooth narrative.
And also when they invite you to their house, you go when you're writing a biography, right? You said before you don't like to go to their houses.
Oh, biography? Well, biography means they're dead. There's no one, I can't interview them. Long dead.
Right. Okay, I'm thinking autobiography.
Yeah.
No,
I'm sure there's much to be gained from going to people's houses. I'm sure there is.
But even if they're dead, though, don't you want to go, let's say, to the parents' house and see the photos and see?
Definitely. Definitely.
Color of the piece.
It's much more than interviewing. You also have newspaper clippings. I mean, but now, there's just being online. This is another subject, so I'll say it quickly if any of this interests you. There's so much research you could do online. It is so much fun. If you're a biographer in the middle, you could wake up 3 a.m, and read 1930 census records and see who lived next door to somebody. And there's just a wealth of information that was never available before. You could also search newspapers. You couldn't do that before. You couldn't, except for the New York Times, which has an index. You couldn't go into a newspaper databank and search the whole paper for the name of your uncle. And that's an incredible gift because a lot of newspapers are online now. You type in a word and it gives you every article on that subject. So I think it's a really good time if you're thinking of doing family histories or just biographies of in general. This is a very good time for that kind of research because so much is online.
On the other hand, do you think it'll be harder to do biographies because the ephemera has changed? Because things, emails have replaced letters?
No, I think there's more. There's more information. Generally, even though people pretend there's less, they say, oh, no one writes letters, but they do. They write everything. Emails count.
No, I know, but some people, I mean, I keep everything.
We keep everything.
But people digitally remove a lot of stuff.
And we have photographs. We have so many great photographs now of every moment of every day. And
Thank you so much.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you. Thank you so much.